I know you've heard and witnessed numerous thrilling tales, but the experience I'm about to share is surely something you've never encountered before. I was a prostitute in Australia and once entertained 6 black men simultaneously. You might not even fathom the lifestyle of prostitutes abroad. My name is Yu, originally from an ordinary family in Zhejiang. After graduating from university in 2019, I got a job in a public institution through the civil service examination. Had life gone on this way, mine would have been a mundane but warm 9-to-5 existence. While not opulent, at least I wouldn't have ended up as a prostitute. In 2012, influenced by my best friend, I got addicted to drugs and later became embroiled in underground casinos. Within half a year, I was drowning in debt. The loan sharks frequently visited my home to demand repayment. The principal was 15万 yuan. My elder brother paid more than 40万 yuan of my gambling debts. Yet with the compounding interest, there was still a debt of 35万 yuan remaining. The most terrifying aspect was that these underworld elements, brandishing the IOUs, stormed into my workplace, claiming I'd cheated them of their hard-earned money, causing me to lose all reputation. Since I could no longer work and live normally, and my parents were also mentally and physically exhausted. If you wonder why I didn't report to the police station, their intelligence quotient was surely below 70. After all, which casino operates without a protective umbrella? The extent of a rat's audacity always depends on the cat. So, sighing and lamenting proved futile. Instead of being expelled by the unit, it seemed better to resign voluntarily. Without informing my parents, I handed my resignation letter to a colleague on good terms and asked him to submit it on my behalf. Then, I took the high-speed rail to Guangzhou and joined a company. The company supervisor, Lin Shen, had lived in Australia. He was sharp-witted and had exceptional persuasive skills. My rival kindled a glint of interest in his eyes. At work, he took exceptional care of me, often inviting me for late-night snacks and complimenting my youth and beauty. Although I knew these were merely preludes to his philandering, I relished this feeling. After all, which girl doesn't enjoy being flattered? A month later, Brother Lin finally had his way with me, and since then, I became his lover. From his tales, I learned bits and pieces about Australia. 2,400 kilometers away on the Pacific Ocean lies such a beautiful and prosperous country. Surprisingly, he scratched his head and mentioned that going to Australia wasn't an easy feat. He stated that the minimum investment for fishermen amounted to 1 million Australian dollars, with million Australian dollars earmarked for investment in Australian equity investment funds and another 10 million Australian dollars for Australian entrepreneurship projects. Studying and immigrating for an undergraduate degree would cost 60万 Australian dollars over 4 years. In 2014, 1 Australian dollar was equivalent to 5月13日 Chinese yuan. Illegal immigration came with high costs and significant risks. I pouted, and old Lin embraced me again, saying in Cantonese that there was still a way. He mentioned that one could pursue the path of working and immigrating. Australia issues 5,000 work visas to the Chinese mainland each year. One can come to Australia for work, and the visa can be renewed upon legal work for 1 year. He claimed to have friends at the immigration office. I was elated. Rolling over, I straddled him and resumed our passionate encounters. The application I submitted was initially for Sydney. However, the visa that was approved was for Melbourne in Victoria. Chinese workers in Melbourne undertake various occupations, ranging from high-end to low-end. With diligent efforts for a few years, it's feasible to save 1 million Chinese yuan. A house in Australia costs only 30 万 Australian dollars. Although a highly popular blogger online claimed to have earned 33万 Australian dollars in 4 years of working in Australia, equivalent to 1.63 million Chinese yuan, some netizens promptly asserted that the blogger was engaged in the sex industry. Otherwise, how could one earn such a substantial sum? One must admit that vision and cognition lie at the core of poverty and ignorance. This blogger wasn't boasting. Not every country offers workers salaries as meager as those in India, in developed nations like those in Europe, the United States, Japan, and South Korea. After deducting living expenses, it's common for workers to save 15000 Chinese yuan or 2000 US dollars monthly, whether in Australia, the United States, or Canada. A worker's daily income can sustain a week of living. The sky in Australia is exceptionally blue, despite being a nature-oriented country. There's not a hint of haze. The gap between urban and rural areas is not pronounced either. However, due to the subdued business atmosphere, the air in the countryside is decidedly fresher and more habitable. Wandering along the rural roads and looking round, it truly lives up to the title of the Garden State. Upon my initial arrival in Australia, I resided at the home of Brother Lin's friend. His name was Zhao Hui, hailing from Fujian, and he operated a restaurant in Chinatown. But I didn't stay there for free. I offered my body as rent and also worked in his restaurant at 32 Australian dollars per hour. Zhao Hui was nearly old enough to be my father. Consequently, he often lacked vigor in bed. How much satisfaction he derived from me remains unknown, but it kindled a desire that had been dormant within me for 26 years. I'm unsure if it was an inherent flirtatiousness or the allure of indulgence in a foreign land. I can't articulate it precisely. I simply yearned for men's caresses. Even while working at the restaurant, upon encountering physically robust male customers, my mind would wander, perhaps discerning my desires. On a weekend, Zhao Hui brought his daytime friend, Edward, to my room and ambiguously stated that Edward thought highly of me and desired an in-depth interaction without excessive coyness. The men and women of different races in the room soon disrobed completely. Edward's build wasn't as imposing as that of other foreigners and was even slightly slender, but this didn't diminish the magnitude between his legs. He pushed me onto the floor, treating me like a prostitute, generating the sound of poochie poochie. I desperately clawed and beat him. My wildness only intensified the man's urge to conquer. The white man even placed one foot on my face, instructing me to hold his toes while he moved. Edward expressed his hope to bring friends along. Next time, the following week, he truly brought his friend, a robust black man named Ed. We embarked on a drive along Route 32 all the way to Carlton Park. Subsequently, an interracial exchange unfolded with vigor. I failed to save any money during my first year in Australia. The primary reason for this was my penchant for traveling. But in 2015, A family upheaval drastically transformed my perspective on wealth and taught me a valuable lesson about life. During that time, my elder brother was detained by the police on charges of hit and run. My mother called to inform me that he had negotiated with the victim's family. As long as 50万 yuan was compensated, the two sides could reach an understanding, and my brother would receive a lenient punishment. My mother hoped that I could contribute 30万 yuan to rescue my brother. I had always shared a close bond with my brother. Otherwise, he wouldn't have emptied his savings to settle my gambling debts. I borrowed money from every possible source but only managed to secure 14000 euros when I sought assistance from Zhao Hui. This cold-hearted individual asserted that our relationship was merely physical and rent-based, with no other obligations. My brother was ultimately sentenced to 6 years in prison. Though when borrowing money, lending constitutes a favor and not lending is within reason, I held an intense grudge against this Fujian fellow. Later, I even enlisted someone to give him a severe beating. I deeply realized that in this world where human bonds are tenuous, no one can be fully relied upon. Self-reliance is the ultimate safeguard. Why do Chinese people have a penchant for saving money? Isn't it precisely to weather the sudden storms of life? But how could I amass a substantial fortune? Merely relying on regular work wouldn't yield significant earnings. No matter how generous the wages in Australia, I could only manage to save a maximum of 7 Australian dollars annually, a far cry from my aspirations. I confided my predicament to Edward. He suggested that I consider venturing into sex work, claiming that a proficient sex worker could earn $280 per hour or even more. Australia is a sexually liberated country. In the laws of any state, prostitution is legal and classified as a service industry. He further mentioned that the sex industry in Australia is mature. Every year, numerous Asian college students and tour guides undertake part-time sex work in Australia during the summer vacation. The crux was that I possessed the requisite talent. I agreed without hesitation. In this world where poverty is scorned but prostitution isn't, regardless of the means of success, people only focus on the glamorous facade. The first job Edward introduced me to was that of a pole dancer in a bar. The bar was situated in the heart of Melbourne and was a renowned club-style establishment. It boasted sensual and sexually alluring individuals from various nations. The first floor housed the reception area, performance stage, 7 private chambers, and lounge. The second and third floors served as our workspaces. The rooms were all white, contrary to expectations. Being a pole dancer didn't entail constantly twirling round the pole like a seductive snake. It involved pole dancing in the nude. Additionally, one was obligated to perform acts such as masturbation and sexual intercourse as per the demands, all in full view of the audience. Well, these weren't overly daunting. Prostitutes merely offer sexual services. The private parts are but tools. As long as adequate payment is made, the customer acquires the right to utilize this tool at will. It's just a routine operation. To be candid, I wasn't intimidated by receiving clients. I boasted an exceptionally robust constitution and could handle 20 customers at once. I even shared intimate moments with 6 black men simultaneously. Despite experiencing multiple instances of incontinence during those encounters, I regained my vitality the following day. What I dreaded the most were the encounters with perverts. The torment these perverts inflict on prostitutes isn't merely physical and mental but often poses a threat to life. For instance, I once encountered a pervert engaged in a choking game who nearly strangled me to death. I fled desperately and informed the boss that I couldn't handle such a client. The boss wore a sullen expression and commanded me to return and complete the task. I obstinately shook my head and was promptly dismissed that very day. After being fired from the bar, I began working as a prostitute in a motel in Western Australia. However, after providing sexual services to a teenager, I was arrested by the police on charges of offering commercial sexual services to a minor under the age of 18 and operating without a license. What rotten luck! How could I have known that the visa issued by the Australian government for foreigners engaged in prostitution work wasn't recognized in Western Australia? Moreover, foreigners often appear mature. In a motel where services are swift, it's impractical to demand identification from every customer. The motel owner paid a considerable amount of bail to secure my release. To fill this financial void, I toiled intensely for a week. In 2018, due to my mother's grave illness, I returned to China and spent each day with my husband. Everyone has their unique story. Whether you understand it or not, please respect others' experiences and refrain from judging them based on your own cognition or ethical standards. If you haven't endured others' hardships, don't urge them to be kind. Everyone faces challenges and aspires to thrive, but those without a protective shield are fated to seek refuge wherever possible. The path that suits oneself is the best.